ghost kitchens, cloud kitchens, dark kitchens. I've heard all three terms, but I guess ghost kitchens, or yeah, I guess ghost kitchens seems to be the most commonly used. But it's an interesting phenomenon. It seems to be catching on quite a bit particularly in the UAE and Saudi and the region. Why do
Yeah.
you think that is? Why do you think it's caught on the way it has?
Look, the region enjoys some interesting statistics when it comes down to online food. We have some of the world's highest order per capita. Take a country like Kuwait. I think the order per capita there is almost five per person. So that's five orders a day per human living in Kuwait. So we've always been on the forefront of online food, primarily because of convenience and obviously optionality. And we drive a lot of technological innovation from that perspective in that sector. So cloud kitchens almost have been seeded here, or at least fortified here in this part of the world, and they continue to grow very rapidly. So that's contributed to the sector's, I guess, proliferation of cloud kitchens in our part of the world.
Okay, and backing up a little, so everyone's clear, a cloud kitchen is basically, or a ghost kitchen is basically a kitchen that is not associated with like a storefront restaurant, but it purely serves an online trade. I think most people, at this point, understand that definition. And your company, just to be clear, is not a cloud kitchen itself. You provide enabling software for companies.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
explain
correct.
that just a little bit more.
So, we saw cloud kitchens about, 3 years ago starting to take root in different parts of the world. You've got food aggregators like Deliveroo, who launched Deliveroo Editions, which was a cloud kitchen arm of their food aggregator. And a lot of the pilot and or heavy investments were happening in this part of the world. And then we had local startups like Icon, Katopia, and others, One Kitchen, all started to, bring their own variations or their own formula to it. And our key takeaway from studying the space was there was no out of the box or native built technology to power this operation. Single brand, single location works fine. Single brand, multiple locations works fine. But when you jam in one location, multiple brands, the existing technology providers really have a hard time with that. So a lot of these cloud kitchens built their own technology or kind of customized what was already out there. But to be quite honest with you, it was rickety. It was not very efficient, largely built on a lot of legacy technology. So we saw that as an opportunity, as white space. When we started the company, it was still 2019. So the pandemic was obviously not with us. And we had made a big bet that cloud kitchens are going to be a driving force for how we consume food. And as these operators continue to expand geographically and their business models, they would need a tech enabler. So we built a purpose-built end-to-end solution to power a cloud kitchen from day zero all the way until their full production and their output.
Okay, so what is from a designing of software perspective, what are the unique challenges for building the software you built for cloud kitchens in terms of the operation of the business? As opposed to just a regular old restaurant, what are the unique challenges?
So first and foremost, you've got multiple brands sitting in one location.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is these multiple brands also sit across multiple food aggregators, right? So typically like in Dubai, for example, or in the UAE, we've got Talabat, we've got Zomato, we've got Careem, we've got Deliveroo. We now have Noon. You've got at least 4 to 5 food aggregators that each one of these brands needs to speak to. So if you think about one location that typically has, let's call it 20 brands sitting across 5 food aggregators, you're talking at almost 100 menus that need to be managed and 100 orders streams that need to be ingested. And then obviously when you look inside the operations, you've got anywhere between 10 to 15 stations, and these stations can be either at appliance level, so that you have a station for grilling, a station for frying, a station for desserts, or a station for drinks, or each brand sits, or a collection of brands sits on that one station. And you have to be able to take that order, send it to the right kitchen, but in addition to doing so, you also need to send it to the right station. So there's a lot of logic that goes into the order management and routing of that software. And then obviously menu structures, and this was kind of new to me, and none of my team members are from the food industry. We all come from very different backgrounds. Looking at a menu, you would think, oh, that's a simple thing, right? I mean, pepperoni pizza, margarita pizza, and so on and so on. But, the clincher was really the modifiers, right? I want extra cheese. I don't want onions. I want extra olives. So you start to get into permutations of variations across each and every dish that we've seen menus in excess of 500 line items, but it's only actually like 7 to 10 recipes, but the variations
all
of
the
them are
variations
endless.
You create this almost algorithmic scale.
It does. It's an exponential explosion of data.
Yeah.
So, and it was quite eye opening for us. And to be quite honest with you, our first stab at it, we failed miserably, primarily because of this whole recipe and modifier story. And it took a couple of tries and a lot of research and customer feedback to perfect it. And proud to say that we got it right. It took some time, but we got it right.
So. You raised some money in March, okay? So you got some investor interest, you've got some backing to build out the platform. But ultimately, who is your customer? It may seem like a silly question, but is it the independent restaurant that wants to get into this, enter the cloud kitchen space? Is it a big food aggregator? Is it a big cloud kitchen company that needs underlying software? All the above? Kind of talk about who your ideal customer set is.
Honestly, all of the above. And what we're starting to see when we started this journey is there's a slow blending of the business model. And I'll give you a flavor of that. So we on the big boy stuff, we've got cloud kitchens like Icon that have 20 plus kitchens or 24 kitchens plus over multiple countries that use our software. We have Delivery Heroes, Talabat, which is their local food aggregator in the GCC, using our software. We've got large chains like Sushi Art or Kebabji or Tortilla or Joga using our software, and we've got local mom and pop, hero brands that a small burger shop and on the side street also using our software. And I tell you, the blending occurred when the pandemic and the restrictions, where all the restaurateurs go, well, listen, it's not going to be viable for me to have one brand cooked out of my kitchen anymore. And even though I own a store and the sign on the door says Mo's Burger, I have a fryer, a grill, a chopping station, and I have supply chain, and I have chefs that are just sitting there idle because dine-in is closed or drive-through is closed. And so how do I make more money to support my operation and to keep myself alive? And they start to say, well, let me create another brand, and instead of calling it Mo's Burger, I'm going to call it Mo's Hot Dogs, right? And I'm using the same supply chain and and it's coming out of the same box. And we've dubbed that term micro cloud kitchens, which is basically the incumbent restaurateurs, looking for ways to survive and to thrive in these times, creating their virtual brand concepts out of the same location and pushing that out. And a lot of our clients have an average of 5 brands out of each of their locations. And some clients have 9 brands out of what was a traditionally only, one brand, one location footprint. So this
was innovation out of necessity during the pandemic.
100%. It was they had to, be very creative to survive. And as word got out that we were unlocking that complexity and that our software makes it as simple as a couple of clicks to do so, we just, it was a cascade of customers that were approaching us on a daily basis and still do to help out with that. So I guess, there is no such a thing as this is a dedicated cloud kitchen and this is a dedicated restaurant anymore. The lines have totally been blurred.
Okay, so not a typical restaurant, but many restaurants have just dedicated their unused capacity to creating additional virtual brands within their existing kitchen. Are they also, I suppose, leasing that capacity out to other?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Some have almost inherently became landlords where, they rented to another restaurant 10 for 15 meters in the back of their restaurant to flip their burgers or, to put their pizza oven and throw in some dough, to just as ways to earn extra income or drive sales per square foot. And we've seen a few examples of that in our backyard.
So the sort of an underlying related, very related topic to cloud kitchens is the idea, because a kitchen can serve a brand that has physical restaurants as well as and has delivery capacity, which they may use a cloud kitchen for, right? But there's also purely virtual restaurants, which I think you've already alluded to. That's an interesting idea unto itself. Sort of, could you talk about a little? What are the economics or sort of success factors of a purely virtual restaurant brand where there's never has been a physical location for the business, and it's strictly, pizzas and burgers that you never see the storefront, you never see a sign, but it exists.
Yeah.
And how do you make that kind of restaurant work? I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, look, we at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw an explosion of these virtual brands. I mean, people were just simply creating a logo, throwing up a banner on a food aggregator, and having 5 to 7 recipes, and off they were a brand, right? And I think at the beginning it was marginally successful, and people saw it as another burger joint, and I can't leave my house. I don't know if it's a real store or not. There's
Well,
no
because you're
mark
seeing
on
it like
it.
in a food aggregator or something like that. So
But
when in a pandemic situation, you don't know if that's a
you
real.
don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
But you don't know. You
Mhm.
don't know if it's I've never eaten there before, and there's no mark on the brand that says I'm a virtual only brand, right?
Right.
But what we started to see was a lot of crowding, particularly around the staples. Like, I mean, everybody was coming up with the burger brands, everybody was coming up with the fried chicken brands, everybody was coming up with the pizza brands, and the ones we saw win were the ones who stuck to the DNA of what good food is. So quality for money, speed and delivery, and consistency. So being able to create that burger time and time again. Those are the ones who've managed to survive the shakeout of the virtual brands. The elements still stand, though. I mean, brand equity and word of mouth, good reviews on food aggregators, being able to keep the customers happy is all the basic formulas or basic ingredients in a formula for a successful brand still holds true for a virtual brand as well.
Mhm.
Another key success factor that we saw with virtual brands are the guys who did them with a view that they'll just put them into 1 or 2 stores, i.e. just serve like 10 or 15 kilometers, didn't do so well. Guys who had big physical fleets, like 50 plus stores, and were able to deploy that virtual brand over a wider area of coverage, were able to justify, the effort and the investment that went into creating a virtual brand.
And
So
that requires using multiple ghost kitchens, correct? If you're going to do that.
multiple ghost kitchens, or largely the incumbents who had 50 stores already, right? I've got
Right,
50
right.
stores of Moe's burgers. I can drop Moe's hot dogs on all of the 50 versus just I have one store. I'll just create another brand onto that store. Those guys typically struggled because, again, they were quite limited in the delivery reach. And then, again, I'm not navel gazing here with you and say you're starting to see a lot of celebrities create their own virtual brands, right? I mean, in the last, I would say 5 or 6 days, George Lopez out of the US has a tacos brand now, right? And that's coming out through virtual kitchens or ghost kitchens, right?
Mhm.
And that's not really a store. You've got YouTubers who are coming up with burger concepts, literally breaking the internet and selling, millions of burgers in a week. So the lines are constantly being redrawn, and what
Yeah.
worked yesterday definitely will not work tomorrow.
So George Lopez aside, but it's interesting maybe that there's kind of an influencer play here that because the barrier to entry is quite a bit lower. I mean, you still,
Very much.
but
Yeah.
that can that be a little bit of fool's gold? You just indicated that there's, it's not like it's easy to do a virtual restaurant.
No,
It's just,
no.
you don't have to have that sort of in-person service component. There's a lot lower upfront costs. But I've heard the argument that over time, you do have to spend more on marketing, and there's more, there are some costs that you may not consider upfront in a virtual brand because even though you don't have that physical storefront was also, pandemic aside, a form of advertising and marketing for the
True.
business. So
Ver-
absent that, your only marketing is that logo on the food aggregator or whatever you do through digital marketing or through a influencer campaign, whatever method you use. There's costs associated with that may be higher than just getting word of mouth and drive through, yeah, and sort of, drive by type business. Do you have a sense of, of that, and, sort of the unseen challenges of doing a virtual?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on, man. You definitely need to up your digital marketing game, since you're only a digital brand, right? And you've got to attract and your customers only through digital mediums. So I would say the spend would probably be a premium to a brick and mortar. You've also, starting out, you have a tremendous amount of wastage, right? I mean, you're going to buy burger buns and burger patties and all the rest of the stuff and just sit there and wait and hope that you're going to get 50 orders today. And if you don't, in the garbage it goes, and you start all over again the next day. And until you build the momentum, the third thing is you're kind of at the mercy of food aggregators, right? When you go on to a Deliveroo or an Uber Eats and you type burger, if you're one of the lucky ones that are ranking on the first, scroll or two, you'll do well. If you're buried under, 300 scrolls, you're cooked, man. And doing business with the food aggregators, no pun intended. Doing business with the food aggregators are not cheap.
Yeah, no, it's sort of the modern version of, the best place to hide a body is on the second page of a Google search result, right? So
that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah. So you said there was a shakeout. Was that when was that happened? Sort of last year or into this year?
Yeah, I'd say end of last year. End of last year, you're starting to see a lot of these virtual brands that were created in the beginning of 2020, starting to fade out or fold, and just stopped existing, really. And then you've seen some amazing virtual brands actually make the hop from virtual to physical. So their restaurateurs created this virtual brand, did supremely well in 2020, and now they're like, well, it needs to live in the real world now, right? So where do I put a store? And let's create a concept around it. Let's look at look and feel and all the rest. So interestingly enough, we born in digital, but now in physical, and vice versa, right?
Interesting. It's sort of like Amazon launching physical stores. Kind of.
Indeed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of parallels. A lot of parallels between retail and food, and e-commerce and food.
Yeah. Interesting. Couple things on that. So just what do you think is sort of the sustainable path for virtual restaurants? Do you think it's a virtual physical hybrid like you just alluded to? Is there a place for purely virtual brands? I think you've indicated some of the success factors, like having a bit of scale, right?
Yeah.
But kind of how do you see that going forward? And you must think about that because it's germane to your business, clearly.
Indeed. Yeah. Look, we believe in the story, and we think virtual brands are going to be around for a really long time. Good ones, ones that follow that typical age-old formula of, good quality, speed and delivery, and value for money and consistency. So we definitely see that as an emerging and long-term trend. And we see the phygital, right? The blending of the physical and the digital. Cloud kitchens will continue to grow. I mean, they're when done right, they are a cost-effective way of food manufacture and delivery. Food aggregators, obviously, here to stay. That's just consumer behavior that's now permanently changed. And as we get better and better with there's an abundance of data, right? Now what you like for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, what you're allergic to, what if you're a vegetarian, if you're a meat lover, what your order time preferences, and as this data starts to get synthesized, you'll start to see personalization at scale, right? Okay. You'll start to see portion control, you'll start to see flavor control, and so on, that is possibly even tied to your IoT and your wearable device. And so you burned 800 calories in the gym this morning, you're good for a burger and lunch.
That's a hell of a round.
Guess what? Yeah, you're eating a lettuce tonight because that's as far as you go.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So that gets into some of the technology behind this. So I can see a lot of machine learning, AI driven personalization. To the point where, you're almost where your biometrics dictate your food choices, and you can almost even set that up to happen automatically. And perhaps, could you talk about where just from a sort of technological evolution standpoint, where you want to take this business? Is it in that direction? Could you talk a bit? Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're working on a couple of, I mean, other than the bread and butter of the end-to-end operation from the time a menu is created to an order is generated in the in-kitchen operation and out the door to our driver, I
Right.
think we've got that down pat, and you know, we've enjoyed wild success with that over the last, you know, year or so of operations. We're now looking at what is beyond that. So some of the things that we're working on are cubby systems where, you know, drivers can just drop the food in a cubby. You will walk over, put in a PIN code or scan a QR code, grab your food and go. Really helpful for, you know, apartment buildings or food halls and food courts and stuff like that. We're also studying the IoT or the Android, the wearable story, and seeing how hyper personalization at scale will plan out, and seeing where we can plant a flag in that world. Other places that we're really, you know, investing a lot of our time and efforts into is matchmaking. So as you rightfully said, not every restaurant is running at full capacity. Actually, I think there was a study that said most restaurants run at around 34% capacity. So how do we marry brands that want expansion without capex to dormant capacity, and do so, you know, with science rather than just arbitrary? So I know this district really could do with 3 Mexican cuisine brands. These guys are breakfast only. Can I get a breakfast only Mexican cuisine to match to those 3 stores? And that way, you know, you create success for both sides of the marketplace. And you use a lot of machine learning to do so, right? If you're a Mexican brand, then you can assume you have a supply chain of guacamole, cheddar cheese, tomatoes, onions, da da da. Okay, this brand also requires these same ingredients, so the restaurateur doesn't need to expand his appliance or expand his supply chain requirements to adopt that brand. And we're spending a lot of time, you know, breaking that problem down, and we're quite confident that we've found a solution, and you know, that's something that we will see before the end of this year.
That's really interesting because I've often heard the 30% capacity figure is interesting because I've often heard, I don't know, the numbers kind of vary, but you hear if a business, if a restaurant business isn't full all the time, it's probably failing, right?
Yeah.
And so you could actually help sort of cut down on the failure rate through
Yeah.
this, you know,
Yeah.
credible efficiency of like capacity utilization. But it's incredibly complex, as you sort of stated at the beginning, with this, you know, the menu and then the variability on the menu, and then if you're a cloud kitchen with, you know, 10 different brands, you know, getting the right food to the right people at the right time. Incredible amount of complexity. But if that
It is.
complexity can be mastered, which is what you're doing, uh, the idea that you know, every kitchen is operating at I wouldn't say full, but optimal capacity, right? Yeah, I don't know if that means more restaurants, but it certainly means fewer unsuccessful ones, probably. Uh,
Yeah.
Makes me think: how have you thought about it? How your technology can help address food waste? I mean, it sort of go hand in hand, doesn't it? Better capacity utilization, less wasted food. I mean, I don't know if you thought about that.
That's we did. I mean, look,
Yeah.
honestly, there's a lot of altruistic current in what we do.
Hmm.
You know, when we started the company, and obviously the pandemic happened, a lot of the customers that originally approached us simply couldn't bear the cost of our software during these difficult times and unpredictable times. And you know, I'm not boasting when we say we just take it for free, and when things turn around for you, you can start paying us. And the drive behind something like that was we wanted to make an impact. We wanted to make we didn't get into this business to, you know, take advantage of people or tax an already difficult scenario for the restaurateurs.
Yeah.
And off of that, you know, altruistic current, you know, food wastage and you know, minimizing the impact on the environment, and you know, looking at alternate protein methods, et cetera, have all been things that we put on the whiteboard. And to answer you know, the question in a short form and say, does our solution reduce food wastage? Of course, because we give you the opportunity to use the same ingredient across multiple recipes, multiple cuisines, so you don't have to put it in the garbage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and hopefully that, you know, creates a ripple effect across multiple, you know, facets.
Right. So another thing that's I find kind of interesting is this question of what is the, you know, in fairness, the ghost kitchen concept, cloud kitchen concept, goes way pre-pandemic. I think what did Travis Kalanick? I forgot what year he launched, cloud kitchens, but it's a few years before the pandemic. I don't know if someone invented it before him. I don't quite know the history, but it's a few years old. So the concept was there. The pandemic shined a light on it, probably accelerated its development. What is the post-pandemic? Is there a post-pandemic letdown on food delivery, on sort of the idea of home versus? Talk about that. Talk about how you think about the post-pandemic world looks for this industry.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be honest with you, this was debated profusely by our investors, by VCs that we've pitched to.
I bet.
And my response was always the same. Look at online food penetration as a sector, and you would see, if you take a global outlook on it, it's still single digits, and some would put it as low as 4 to 5, some will put it as high as 7 to 8, but it's still single digits. Now, if you look at how we consume everything else in our life, right, whether it's media through Netflix or Apple TV or whatever the case may be, even down to our groceries or our office needs, you have Amazon. So you've got high double-digit penetrations in the 30s and 40s on how we consume our clothes, our commodities, et cetera, et cetera. But something as reoccurring as food, as in I need 3 meals a day, is still happening at 3 or single digits. What do you think is going to happen? It's going to catch up, right? I mean, we live on our phones, and we press a button and things just appear. Mm-hmm. So that is not going anywhere. And that consumer behavior obviously was catalyzed by the pandemic, and it will just continue to move forward. And as the cost structure of online food becomes cheaper and cheaper, you're already starting to see the impact, right? New apartment buildings are being built with much smaller kitchens because cooking is now a hobby, not a necessity. I can consume food at a cheaper price than having to go to the grocery store, buy all its components, spend an hour or two putting it together. I'll get the same output and a cheaper price, right? So that's here to stay. We've got a lot of headroom to go. The pandemic just helped us accelerate, but it definitely is not going to flatten out or plateau.
Okay, fair enough. So I want to talk about the food aggregators. They can be controversial. I mean, there's I don't know what I read about, the sort of the tension between the aggregators and the restaurants over fees and who owns the customer, and how do you think that's going to evolve, and how does the food kitchen or the ghost kitchen relationship with the food aggregators evolve? Do they get into each other's businesses, for example?
Lines are getting blurry, and I think people say, well, food aggregators are bad because they're taxing my business, but I like to always counter the argument that, well, if we didn't have food aggregators, you wouldn't have a digital business, right? And if you didn't have a digital business, you could potentially be giving up about 30% or 40% of your top line today. Mm-hmm. And food aggregators also gave birth to the cloud kitchens because cloud kitchens only do delivery, right? And it's not through phone orders. So they're not all bad, evil organizations. And I think what's happening here is that the industry is finding an equilibrium where both sides of the fence have to coexist. What makes sense by way of commission rates and what against what services, who owns the customer, and draw that point clearly so that everybody on both sides of the table is actually making some money. Because, to be honest with you, when restaurateurs, cry wolf on the food aggregators saying, I'm not making money because of them. If you've looked at the P&L of these food aggregators, they're not making any money either, So it looks like nobody's making money in this game, right?
Which makes you wonder where does it go? There's been consolidation already, globally in the food aggregator space. I imagine there'll be more.
So look, they will, and I think again, as price performance indexes come down and we get better, sharper, smarter, and use technology to drive this business, we will get to that happy space. It took Amazon 19 years to turn a profit, right? I mean, sending you a box of paper clips was a very expensive ordeal for Amazon, but it didn't stop them from doing it, right?
Yeah, but they made it. Yeah, they've obviously created incredible efficiency, and also the sort of the amount of scale creates that incredible valuation, which, they almost don't need to make money.
There you go. Yes, sir. So I think that's where at the nascent stage of the sector, and we're going to see a lot of evolution. And I think the evolution is going to be healthy for both parties, the food aggregators as well as the restaurant
Yeah.
and cloud kitchen community.
Okay. Now, I've been reading. This is a little bit of well, not really an aside. But I'm not sure. Just curious about it. I've been read a article about I think it was in Indonesia, and I forgot the name of the company, but they doing ghost kitchens and they're aggregating home kitchens as part of their ghost kitchen strategy. Have you? And I think I've seen something about this in Saudi. I forgot. I should have written the names down before I spoke. But in part of my research, I came across this, and I'm wondering if you've looked at this and what the pros and cons of this are, and if this is will be part of a significant part of the ghost kitchen industry.
It's a tricky one because we've seen it, we've heard of it, we've seen multiple people try to unlock that dormant capacity, right? So I have a kitchen in my house, I'm not at home, and it's just sitting there, right? It's like the couch for Airbnb. How do I
car for
extract more for
whatever,
or car for Uber, right? But with food, it's a little tricky because there's licensing requirements, there's food health safety requirements, there's hygiene factors. So the tricky part is when you start to play in people's homes by way of cooking and food prep, there's a lot of concern about the hygiene, and there's a lot of concern about the regulation around unlocking that. So I think it's
consistency.
Still a little
I think
early.
would be a huge problem as well.
Huge one. I think it's early. I think what you're seeing, what we are really excited about and have numerous customers, is the unlocking of commercial kitchens as dormant capacity. So we've got a lot of hotel operators that have leased out their hotel kitchens to some of our clients, and we power a lot of hotels in the region off of that space. We're starting to see universities open up their kitchens because they're, again, large commercial kitchens. We've seen now stadiums opening up their kitchens into delivery-only kitchens for the radius of the. So we're seeing a lot of commercial kitchen capacity coming into this multi-brand cloud kitchen story. But I think it's a little ways away from home kitchens coming into the game.
Yeah, I was skeptical about it, but I did read that it's being experimented with, and I know that again, I'm sorry I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but the company in Indonesia, I mean, they had a process for evaluating the kitchens and vetting them, and they would actually install their own equipment in some of the kitchens to bring them up to a certain, equal standard of. But again, I was wondering, how do you achieve some scale here if you're just doing all that for each individual kitchen? It seems almost easier to go into a bigger commercial kitchen and do it that way. But anyway, it was an interesting idea. Anyhow. Just a couple of quick things before we wrap up. Is this your first startup, or have you?
So I've spent the last 20 plus years in large retail corporations like Macy's and Ross Stores in the US and others.
Sure. Yeah.
And in those organizations, I was an intrapreneur. So in my last organization where I spent 12 years, I was fortunate enough to work for a CEO and a chairman that were quite fans or champions of innovation. And, my last 5 years, I set up a digital division in that company where it grew to over $100 million and 800 people. It's funded by the corporation itself or the company that I worked for, but almost an independent initiative by myself. And obviously, as a standalone company. So theoretically or technically not my first startup, but my first on my own startup. So, one that I had to go beg for money to get started. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. First one you had to raise some green for. Yeah. So the reason I ask that is just I kind of always like to close with sort of just some startup life type questions, and the thing you wish you knew more about before you started the business in terms of what it would take.
Look, it's an interesting story. I mean, the startup life, and I'm a little grayer than most founders who jump into their first startup. So I think I'm well prepared from a corporate background and experience, and have the governance and the mature outlook on how this should be done. So I feel fairly confident in that. But the one thing that always surprises me in the last 2 years was having to make decisions with little to no data points, and you're almost falling back on your intuition and gut as you make left and right decisions, and you pivot every time you feel like you're not quite there. And having spent most of my adult life and corporate life, you always have reams of spreadsheets that can guide your future outlooks, right? I mean, you know what you've done the last 10 years, and you can easily predict what you'll do tomorrow. In startup world, particularly in highly innovative sectors, you're flying off the seat of your pants, and you just have to trust your decision. Hopefully your decision is right, and if it's not, you need to be able to see that real quick and pivot before you sink the company.
Right. Don't be stubborn. Right?
Don't be stubborn, and know when to fold. You know, and that was kind of hard for me to do, and trusting instinct and intuition with uncertainty was new. Continue to try to master it, but I'll tell you, that's the one thing I wish I knew coming in, because it would have helped in the early days.
Okay. Last question, which I probably should have asked before the startup life question, is geographic expansion. Are you going to be a regional player? Are you going to be an international player? How do you look at other markets in evaluating?
Yeah, no. So we are fortunate enough to be in over 7 countries at the moment. So we've got customers in Singapore, Pakistan. We're talking to customers in Malaysia, Philippines. We're obviously at the UAE and Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, in Egypt. We have discussions on with cloud kitchens in Amsterdam, UK, and Paris, and Canada. And actually, I think we're either signed or about to sign our first one in the US.
Nice.
So the short answer is we kind of went everywhere, and it wasn't by design, to be quite honest and transparent. It is a direct result of the explosion of cloud kitchens worldwide and the anemic offering when it comes down to technology enablement. So we've been very fortunate that all of this business was reverse inquiries and inbound leads. As far as geographical focus, we definitely feel that APAC is a strong region by way of online food penetration, growth, sheer size. So we're going to be making some significant investments in the likes of Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and South Korea, at least over the next 3 to 4 months.
Okay, what about the African continent? How do you evaluate?
Well, we just got contacted by a cloud kitchen operator in South Africa, so we're in discussions. It's a little early. Online food penetration there remains relatively low, so it has a lot of room to grow. And we always encourage the restaurateurs and/or the entrepreneurs to take advantage of this opportunity and build out their cloud kitchen initiatives. And if they need software, by all means, reach out to us. That's the easiest part for us to solve for you.
Great. Okay, we'll end it there. It's been a great conversation. Really appreciate your time and
thank you so much for the opportunity.
Helping us learn about ghost kitchens, cloud kitchens, dark kitchens, whatever term you prefer. Anyway,
well, of course. I appreciate it. You have yourself a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.